Okay, so we're at 162 people right now. So I'm assuming that the other 100 people will soon be joining us in the next 10 minutes. The so-called latecomers. Good morning, everybody. Ringsamya, Bhumika, Lasya, Fizza, Sagar, second, Rakshita, Sushmita, Advait, Sindhu, Pritish, Sanchita, and Hari Prakash, Sanjana. Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning. So it's great to see you guys. So today is our second class of the week. We have two more classes after this one. No, Pratish, it's not an attendance. I'm just taking the names of all those people who wished. Okay, okay. Anyway, so thank you very much, Shreya. So I hope all of you are doing well now. So the lockdown has been considerably lifted. I'm assuming all of you are now free to go outside and maybe play also. I don't know how many of you are going outside and playing. How many of your parents are letting you do that? Anyway, so I hope that all of you have the information. Okay, morning Kirtan. I did not see your message then. So I hope all of you know that next Sunday you have your MT, right? 31st of May you have your MT6. So as I said that in MT6 you have your full portion of 11th, but the marks distribution will be equal. Okay. So according to the length of the chapter, okay, how big the chapter is, the chapter will carry certain number of marks. Okay, unlike your MT5, where the last 5 chapters of the biology carried 50% of the weightage, here all the chapters will have roughly equal weightage. So make sure that you study each and every one of them. If you have any doubts from any of those chapters, you can always hit me up. Again, the only problem is that there are almost 300 of you and it becomes difficult if suddenly 10-15 of you start texting me, but I'll try my best to answer your queries, right? And as you guys might have seen that yesterday Pradeep sir posted a link, right, on how to ask doubts on your Avanti app. So you can also do that, right? That would take some load off me. But again, if you want to get in touch with me personally, please let me know. No, Chetna, second 12th standard syllabus is not there in MT6. Okay, 12th standard syllabus starts from MT7, which will happen most probably in June end, on June end, most probably, right? Okay, so today is your fourth lecture of sexual reproduction in flowering plants, right? We are already done with 3 lectures. So today we'll be starting with your fourth lecture, right? So Dhanush, it's there in the group here. It's there in the group. You can see it from there, and then you can get in touch with me. Okay, chalo. So today is your fourth lecture of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Let's just do a brief recap of what we have studied so far, right? So what have we studied so far? So we started the chapter with studying about your male gametes, right, and the male gametophyte, where we talked about how microspores are formed from pollen mother cell or microspore mother cell or microsporocyte, right? And the process is known as microsporogenesis. After that, we learned the parts of a female reproductive part, right? And then we talked about megasporogenesis, that is formation of a megaspore from your megaspore mother cell, and that process is known as megasporogenesis. And after that, we talked about development of an embryo sac from your megaspore, which is known as megagametogenesis. And then in yesterday's class, we also started with pollination. We talked about self-pollination and cross-pollination. In self-pollination, we looked at 2 different types of pollination, right? And then that is autogamy and geitonogamy. And in autogamy, we looked at further subdivision, right? You had your cleistogamy, you had your chasmogamy, and you had your bud pollination. And we stopped the class at after talking about geitonogamy, what are the advantages of self-pollination and what are the disadvantages of self-pollination. So today we'll be starting with your cross-pollination. What are the different modes of cross-pollination? What are the different names of the different mode of cross-pollination? And then if time permits, we'll start with pollen pistil interaction, because in your class always I'm unable to cover what I set out to cover. Hopefully today is the day when we cover all that I've set out for. Anyway, so as always, I have a couple of revision questions to get you guys off with. So the first revision question is there on your screen. Okay, the first revision questions: how many meiotic division are required for formation of 100 functional megaspore? how many meiotic division are required for formation of 100 functional megaspore? Okay, your options are 100, 50, 75, 25. Okay, so that is the option that is there on your screen. So how many meiotic divisions are required for the formation of 100 functional megaspores? Okay, chalo. So all of you have read the question. If you remember yesterday's class very well, you guys should be able to answer this. It's not that difficult. बहुत simple question है. Okay, now the poll is live on your screen. Get your votes in, guys. Let's see. Get your votes in. Okay, 50% of you have voted so far. The other 50%, please get your votes in so that I can move on to the next one. Rakshita, the poll is not visible, but at the bottom of your screen, there must be 3 dots. Click on those 3 dots, then you'll see the option of poll. Okay, 60% of you have voted. 10 seconds, then I'll close the polling. Please get your votes in, beta. NEET का exam तो है नहीं that there is negative marking. Get your votes in. Okay, I'll close the poll in 5, 3, 2, 1, and I'll stop. Check it. Okay, so 71% of you voted. Okay, so make sure that in the next one, people, please vote. That gives me a fair idea how many of you understood what I'm teaching, right? So that is very important for me. Okay, anyway, so the question was how many meiotic divisions are required for formation of 100 functional megaspores, right? As you can see that 48% of you went with D, 48% of you went with D, and 26% of you went with B, then 21% went with A. And I'm really sorry to report that the correct answer here is your option A. The correct option here is option A. Dekho, we all know that in a normal meiosis, a parent cell gives rise to 4 daughter cells, right? In a normal meiosis, a parent cell gives rise to 4 daughter cells. But if you remember what happens in megaspore formation, what happens in megaspore formation? In megaspore formations, 3 of them degenerate and only 1 of them remains, and that turns into a functional megaspore, right? So if you want to get 100 functional megaspores, you would need 100 divisions. If the other 3 were not getting degenerated, that means you would only require 25, because 25 into 4 is 100, and we know that 1 meiotic division gives rise to 4 daughter cells. But here the other 3 degenerate and only 1 remains, right? So if you want to get 100 functional megaspores, you would need 100 meiotic division. So the correct answer is your option A. The correct answer is option A. That is, if you want to get 100 functional megaspores, you need 100 meiotic division. Okay, I hope this is clear to everybody, which only 21% of you selected. Okay, so please make sure that you pay attention to the question. Okay, this type of question is slightly based on logic, and these type of questions are very common, right? If you look at it, nowhere in your textbook it is directly mentioned that if you want to get 100 functional megaspores, you would need 100 meiotic division. But if you have read the textbook carefully, if you have listened to the class carefully, then you would know that the answer is A, because 3 of them degenerate and only 1 of them remains. So it's very important to understand the information that is being given in the class, because if you do that, then the questions become very easy. Okay, so let's look at the next question. Now, the next question is, which of the following is a mismatched pair? Which of the following is a mismatched pair? Storage of pollen grain minus 196 degree. Okay, pollen energy, carrot grass, Chasmogamous flowers, exposed anther and stigma, xenogamy, self-pollination. Okay, this is slightly easy. Again, if you remember the last 2 classes, you should be able to answer this, or maybe 3. I don't remember. Okay, so you have to select the mismatched pair. Storage of pollen grain minus 196 degrees Celsius, pollen allergy, carrot grass, Chasmogamous flower, exposed anther and stigma, xenogamy, self-pollination. Those are the options that you guys have on your screen. Okay, chalo, let me just relaunch the poll. Okay, now the poll is live on your screen. Get your votes in, beta. Okay, if you have again paid attention to the last 2 to 3 classes, you guys should be able to answer this. It's a very straightforward question based on whatever I've taught you. There's not even a single thing in this question which I've not taught you. Pritish, that is minus 196, beta. That is minus 196. देखो ना, दो dash है beta. Minus 196. I said also it is minus 196. Okay, 54% of you have voted. 10 seconds, then I'll close the poll. 10 seconds, then I'll close the poll, beta. Get your votes in. Okay, so for 60% of you have voted, it would be very nice if we can get the number to at least 75%. I don't know why you guys do not show enthusiasm for polling here. 8th standard kids are so enthusiastic about polling. Okay, chicken. So 3, 2, 1, and I'll stop. So once again. Okay, done. So 65% of you think that D is the correct option. 65% of you think D is the correct option. Now, if you look at the D option, you see a term which is xenogamy. Now, if you look at it, I have not yet mentioned the term xenogamy yet. I have mentioned autogamy, I have mentioned geitonogamy, but I have not mentioned xenogamy yet. So in that case, what you can do is that leave that option, because I have mentioned the other 3 options in the class. I have mentioned that storage of pollen grain takes place at minus 196 degrees Celsius. I have mentioned that in class. Then pollen allergy is caused by carrot grass. I've also mentioned that. And then Chasmocamus flowers are flowers that have exposed anthers and stigma. I've also mentioned that. That means by the process of elimination, the incorrect option is, or the mismatched pair is option D, xenogamy self-pollination. Okay, so that is the incorrect one. So sometimes if you come across such questions where you do not know one of the option, beta elimination karke dekh lo. Right, because if you have heard the other 3 options, then you can eliminate them whether they fit the correct question or not. So sometimes you will have such questions where you might not have heard of one of the options. In that case, use your ability to eliminate stuff. Okay, so take care of that. Chalo. So on that note, I will start with today's class. So what are we going to start today? Today we are going to start with xenogamy. Today we are going to start with xenogamy, which is nothing but a technical name for cross-pollination. So make sure that you remember cross-pollination is the same as xenogamy. Autogamy and geitonogamy are self-pollination. So what is cross-pollination? A simple 10th standard textbook definition. It is the transfer of pollen grains from anther of one flower to the stigma of a genetically different flower. What does genetically different flower means? Genetically different flower means a different parent, right? So what is cross-pollination or xenogamy? So cross-pollination or xenogamy is the transfer of pollen grains from anther of one flower to the stigma of flower on a different plant, which in a fancy way you can say that stigma of a genetically different flower. Okay, now allogamy includes both geitonogamy and xenogamy. Okay, this is very important. Allogamy includes both geitonogamy and xenogamy. And I know that geitonogamy is a form of self-pollination, while xenogamy is a form of cross-pollination. So what is allogamy? You use the term allogamy whenever the flower changes. We know that in geitonogamy, despite the fact that the parent remains the same, the flower changes. So that is a form of allogamy. And in xenogamy or cross-pollination, flower obviously changes because you're moving to a different parent itself. So what is allogamy? Allogamy is the case whenever the pollen grain is being transferred to a different flower. If the flower belongs to the same parent body, you will call it geitonogamy. If it is being transferred to a flower of different parent, then you call it xenogamy. Okay? So make sure that you remember this. Allogamy is whenever your pollen grains are transferred to a different flower. If the flower belongs to the same parent, then it is geitonogamy, which we talked about yesterday. If it is transferred to a different parent, then it is known as xenogamy. Okay? I hope that the term allogamy is clear to everybody, because the term allogamy is not mentioned in a textbook. So allogamy is whenever there is a change in flower. If flower remains same, geitonogamy. If the parent remains same, right? despite the fact that the flower is changing, but the parent remains same, then it is geitonogamy. If the parent is also changing along with flower, then it is xenogamy. Okay? So cross pollination is performed with the help of external agency, which may be abiotic. Abiotic means what? That they do not have life, wind, water, or biotic, like insects, birds, bats, and snails, right? So cross pollination require agents, and the agents can be abiotic, like wind or water, or they could be biotic, like insects, birds, bats, snails, etc. And today we'll be talking about all these agencies of cross pollination and what are the characteristics of such type of cross pollination. Okay, so I hope everything on this slide is clear to everybody. Just give me a yes or no so that I can move forward better. I hope that everything on this slide is clear to everybody so that I can move to the next one. Okay, so I'll move forward then. Naren, snails also take part in it. Yeah, snails also. So snails, what they do is that they move from one flower to another in the search of nectar. So snails also take part in pollination. Obviously, not as many as insects take part in, but snails also take part in it. Okay, take it. You want me to repeat allogamy again? Beta, dekho, allogamy means what? Basically, what does allogamy means? Allogamy means whenever flower changes. Allogamy means whenever your flower changes. So if the flower is on the same parent body, then you call it geitonogamy because it is form of self-pollination. If the flower is on a different parent body, then you call it xenogamy because now it is cross-pollination. That is what we mean by allogamy. Whenever the flower changes, whenever the pollen grain is moving to a different flower. If the flower is on the same parent body, then it is geitonogamy. If the flower is on a different parent body, then it is a xenogamy. Chandana, bats also take part in it. Bats also take part in it, beta. Okay, so bats again, they look for nectar in flowers, and during the process of sucking nectar out of flower, the pollen grains stick to them, then they move to another flower and they transfer it. So bats also take part in it. Okay, chicken. So let's start with your anemophily. So what is anemophily? Anemophily is transfer through wind. Remember that. Okay, so anemophily comes from two Greek words. Anem means wind in Greek and phily means to love something. So whenever pollen grains are transferred by wind, okay, that is known as anemophily. Okay, so examples of plants that utilize wind for cross pollination are coconut palm, date palm, maize, many grasses, and cannabis. Remember all these examples. Examples are of paramount importance here. Okay, so what is anemophily? Whenever wind is utilized, okay, whenever wind is utilized, then we say that the plant is anemophilic in nature. Then we say that the plant is anemophilic in nature because it is using wind to transfer pollen grains. Okay, examples are coconut palm, date palm, maize, grasses, and cannabis. Okay, yes, Meghna, obviously allogamy is seen, right? Cross pollination is a form of allogamy. So all those plants that take part in cross pollination, they are undergoing allogamy because allogamy is nothing but change of flower. And all those plants that observe geitonogamy, they are also showing allogamy, right? Okay. So what is anemophily? If anybody asks you, okay, what is cannabis? Beta, so cannabis is a plant which is used to produce drugs. You guys might have heard of morphine, right? So morphine is produced from your cannabis. Okay, so cannabis is a plant which is used to produce drugs, and obviously a simple person cannot grow cannabis because it is against the law. Only pharmaceutical companies can grow cannabis. If you are caught growing cannabis anywhere, whether it is your personal garden or in a farm, okay, then you will be jailed. Okay, because cannabis is used to produce drugs. Okay, chicken. So the example that we are seeing here, so in this example, anemophily is taking place. Okay, as you can see that the pollen grains are being carried by the wind. So in the photo that you can see, anemophily is taking place. Okay, thank you very much, Kushal, for your enlightenment. Okay, so what are the characteristics of anemophilous flowers? So the characteristics are flowers are small and inconspicuous. Now, All of you will ask what is the meaning of inconspicuous. Can anybody tell me what is the meaning of inconspicuous? Yes, Pranav, I have seen better. Can anybody tell me what is the meaning of inconspicuous? Okay, check it. So those of you who will ask me the meaning of inconspicuous. So inconspicuous means something that is not easily observable or something that is not easily seen. Okay, so that is what inconspicuous means, something that is not easily observable or not easily seen. So flowers are of Anemophilous, flowers are small and inconspicuous. Okay, they need not be very big flowers. They need not be very big flowers because they do not require insects, right? They just require wind, and wind does not care about what is your flower size. So the flowers are small and inconspicuous. The flowers are small and inconspicuous. Now, non-essential parts are either absent or reduced. Non-essential parts of the flowers are either absent or reduced. Okay, next, flowers are colorless, odorless and nectarless, right? Why are they colorless, odorless and nectarless? Because all these traits are essential to attract pollinators like insects, birds, bats, snails. But wind does not require any such things. Yeah, wind does not care whether you are colored, whether you have odor or not, whether you have nectar or not. So if they depend on wind for pollination, they would avoid expending energy on producing colorful flowers, on producing odor flowers, or producing flowers full of nectars, right? So the flowers are colorless, odorless and nectarless. Okay, okay. In case of unisexual flowers, the male flowers are more abundant, right? The male flowers are more abundant because the pollen grains have to be transferred, and pollen grains have to be produced in very large amount, because wind will transfer them, and obviously if wind is transferring them, they will get deposited on all the random places apart from the stigma also. So male flowers are more abundant. In bisexual flowers, stamens are generally numerous, pistils are generally inovule. Okay, so in bisexual flowers, the stamens are generally more numerous. Same logic that okay, once again, Viresh, same logic, since pollen grains have to be produced in large amount, the stamens are generally much more in number, so that more pollen grains can be produced. Okay, now what is the meaning of nectarless, Viresh? Nectarless means something that does not contain nectar, Now, what is the last point? Anthers are versatile. What is the last point? Anthers are versatile. Now, what do I mean by anthers are versatile? Okay, so anthers are classified into different categories based on where does the filament attaches. To them. So versatile anthers are those anthers. In which the filament attaches exactly in the middle. Okay, so the filament can attach at the top also, it can attach at the bottom also. But when the filament attaches to the anther exactly in the middle, then those anthers are called versatile anthers. So anthers of Anemophilous flowers are versatile. Okay, so as you can see here, all the properties that we have talked about, the plant is trying to save energy in those processes which are not necessary, right? Does not require color, does not require odor, does not require nectar, because it does not need to attract pollinators, right? Flowers are small and inconspicuous because, again, we do not need big flowers to attract insects. Then your pollen grains are produced in much more amount because your male flowers are much more abundant, or your stamens are also much more numerous. Dhanush, ek baar pad liya beta, do not type it again and again because I get distracted then. Okay, okay. So last point is anthers are versatile. What does that mean? Anthers are versatile means that the filament is attaching to the anther exactly in the middle. Okay, that is what versatile anther means. Okay, that is what versatile anther means. Okay, so I'll move forward then. Okay, so Ruchi, I'll look into that and I'll let you know.
So what are some of the more traits of anemophilous flowers? So the grains are light, small, winged or dusty, non-sticky and unwettable. Obviously they need to be light and small, because if they're heavy and dense, wind will not be able to carry them to a very long distance. So they are small, okay, they are dusty, right? That is, the density is very low, they're smooth, and they're non-sticky, right? Sticky pollen grains are seen in those flowers which depend on insects, because there the pollen grain needs to stick to the insect. But here they are not sticky, and they are also unwettable. They are also unwettable because if during the process of transfer they fall into a source of water, they do not get wet. Okay. Okay, what is the structure present on the outside of exine that makes a pollen grain sticky? What is the structure that is present on the outside of exine which makes the pollen grain sticky? I mentioned this, Pritish. What is the, no Prakriti, that is wrong. What is the substance? No Pooja, that is wrong. Atar, that is wrong. Okay, Narek has given the correct answer. Shreya has given the correct answer. Shiv Prakash has given the correct answer. Okay, now Pritish has also given the correct answer. No, Nivedita, that is wrong. Chetan, that is also wrong. Aishwarya, that is correct. Sanjana, that is wrong. Pratiksha, that is correct. So if you remember, I mentioned presence of a sticky substance known as pollen kit, right? Pollen kit is present on the outside of exine, which makes the pollen grain sticky. Okay, so here the pollen grains lack pollen kit, so the pollen grains are non-sticky. Now next one, stigma is hairy, feathery or branched to catch the wind-borne pollen grains. So stigma is hairy, feathery or branched to catch the wind-borne pollen grains, right? So that they can easily catch the pollen grains that are traveling in the air. The stigma is hairy, feathery or branched. Okay, so if you look at, so I have a picture of maize cob, right? So the large thread-like stigmas and styles of cob of maize hang in air to catch wind-borne pollens. Okay, so I have a photo of a maize cob. In that you will see what those hairy, feathery and branched stigmas look like. So why are they hairy, branched or feathery? So that they can catch the pollen grains that are traveling in the air. Now, anemophily is highly wasteful as it is non-directional. Obviously, since they are dependent on wind, if the wind is blowing in a particular direction, it will carry the pollen grains in that particular direction, right? So what happened? Pritish, I'll explain what is that. Do not worry. So it is non-directional, right? So if let's say your plants are in this area, if the wind is blowing in this area, then all the plants on the opposite direction to the wind, they will not get the pollen grains, right? So it is highly wasteful as it is non-directional. It is highly wasteful as it is non-directional. Okay. Now, pollen grains are produced in large number. Obviously, since they are being transferred by wind and they are non-directional, they can fall anywhere, wherever the wind takes them. Pollen grains have to be produced in large number to ensure that the success rate of fertilization does not decrease. Okay. And last point, wind pollinated ovules. Okay, flowers often have a single ovule in each ovary. They have a single ovule in each ovary and numerous flowers packed in an inflorescence. So numerous flowers are packed together, but each flower contains only one ovule. Each flower contains only one ovule. If you remember, in last week's class, I showed you a figure in which there were multiple ovules within a single flower. But in wind pollinated flowers, often they contain a single ovule in each ovary. A single ovule in each ovary. Those are some of the properties of anemophilous flowers. Make sure you remember them, because you can get any type of question. They can ask you a question, which of the following is not a property of anemophilous flower. So you should know which. If you know what are the properties, only then you can tell which one of them is not a property. Or they can ask you a straight up question, which one of the following is a property of anemophilous flower. Or what they can do is, they can give you properties of anemophilous flower, and then they can give you example, which one of the following flower is anemophilous in nature. So for that, you need to remember the examples that I gave at the start of this topic, right? That is your maize, okay, then your cereals, so they depend on your anemophily. So make sure that you remember the examples also, because questions can be asked in any particular form. So if you look at, so this is a maize cob. This is a maize cob. So these hairy, feathery structures that you see, so that is your stigma, which is ready to receive the pollen grains that will be transferred by the wind. So that is a maize cob with the stigma hanging outside, right? So that is what, Pritish, is meant by a cob of maize, right? So when the fertilization will happen, then this maize cob will turn into a maize, right? Which all of us eat. So that is what we mean by the stigma is hairy or feathery, so that they can easily catch the pollen grains that are traveling in the air. Okay. And another close example of the properties of an male part of an Anemophilus flower, anther is loaded with pollen and it dangles loosely the filament and exposes the pollen so that the pollen grain can be easily carried away. Stigma is feathery and it is adapted to catch the pollen grain, and filament is long and loose. Filament is long and loose, and as you can see in this figure, that the filament is attaching to the anther right in the middle. So the anthers are versatile because the filament is attaching to the anther exactly in the middle. Okay. Okay. So is anemophily clear to everybody? Beta, give me a yes or no. Is anemophily clear to everybody? Sabko anemophily samjha kya? Then I'll move to the next one. Okay, is anemophily clear to everybody? Okay, 1 second. Okay, so let's move forward then. So that was your anemophily. Next is your hydrophily. Hydro means water, phily means love. Obviously, that means we are talking about pollination through water. Now, pollination through water is not as common in flowering plants as it is in some of the primitive plants. Okay, which phylum depends heavily on water for reproduction? Which phylum of kingdom plant depends heavily on water for fertilization? So, as you guys are pointing out, that bryophytes typically depend on water for their fertilization. Okay, but hydrophily is not that common in angiosperms. Okay, there are very few examples that depend on hydrophily or water for transfer of pollen grains. Okay, so what is hydrophily? So transfer through the agency of water. So when pollen grains transfer with the help of water, then we call that as hydrophily, and those flowers, those plants are called hydrophilous flowers. Okay, now pollination by water is quite rare in flowering plants and is limited to 30 genera, mostly monocots, right? So mostly hydrophily is seen in monocots, and there are roughly 30 genera in which we see hydrophily. As I said, that hydrophily is not that common in flowers. Okay, they are not that common in angiosperms. There are roughly about only 30 genera in which hydrophily is seen. Again, remember the examples. Examples are Vallisneria, Hydrilla, Zostera, etc. Vallisneria, Hydrilla, Zostera, etc. Remember the examples because again, I will be talking about properties of hydrophilous flowers. So again, they can ask an example. They can give you properties of hydrophilous flower. Then they'll ask you which one of the following examples satisfies the above given condition. So remember the examples. The examples are straight from your textbook. Vallisneria, Hydrilla, Zostera. Okay, let's see. So what are the characteristics of hydrophilous flowers? Flowers are small and inconspicuous. Obviously, again, the flowers need to be small and inconspicuous because you're not attracting insects or other pollinators to the flower. So it's okay if the flowers are small as long as sufficient number of pollen grains are being produced. Because in the end, what matters is pollen grain and egg. That's it. Everything else is accessory. So अगर तुम्हारा काम उसके बिना भी बन जाता है, obviously you would not do it, right? So flowers are small and inconspicuous. Perianth and other floral parts are unwettable. What is perianth, beta? What is perianth? You guys might have studied this in 11th standard. What is perianth? What is perianth? Who will tell me what is perianth? What is perianth? Okay, what is perianth? What is perianth? So perianth is when, as some of you have pointed out, when calyx and corolla are fused and you cannot differentiate between them. So that is known as perianth, right? So perianth and other floral parts are unwettable. Obviously, they should be unwettable because they're usually in water or around water. So they are unwettable. That is, they do not get wet because of a presence of a waxy substance on their surface. Okay? Okay. Now, nectar and odor are absent. Same logic. You're not attracting insects, you're not attracting birds, you're not attracting bats. So nectar and odor are absent. Okay. Now, pollen grains are naked without exine. Very important to remember that plants that depend on hydrophily, plants that are hydrophilous in nature, their pollen grains are naked, that is without exine. Why is that the case? I tried looking it up. I couldn't find a concrete reason why that is the case. Maybe because they are less exposed to harmful conditions underwater. So maybe that is why exine is absent. But the exine is absent in pollen grains of plants that are hydrophilous. They are thread-like for underwater pollination and spherical for surface water pollination. Very important. A question has been asked on this previously also, that if the pollen grains are transferred from under the water, if the pollen grains are transferred from under the water, then they are thread-like. But if they are transferred on the surface of the water, then they are spherical in nature. So the shape of the pollen grain depends on how they are being transferred. If they are transferred from within the water, then they are thread-like. If they are transferred from the surface of the water, then they are spherical in shape. Now, pollen grains are light and unwettable due to presence of mucilage cover. Obviously, pollen grains also need to be light and unwettable. Light, why do they need to be light? Because if the density is high, they will just sink in the water, right? And if they are wet, then that might compromise the integrity of the male gametes present within them. So pollen grains are light and unwettable due to mucilage cover. Last, stigma is long, sticky, but unwettable. Stigma is long, sticky, but unwettable. Okay, so why stigma long and sticky? So that it can easily catch the pollen grains that are coming towards it. But it is also unwettable in nature due to the presence of a mucilage. Okay, so are the properties of hydrophilous flowers clear to everybody? Are the properties of hydrophilous flower clear to everybody? It's not oily, Pranav. You can say it's waxy. Okay, so are the properties of hydrophilous flowers clear to everybody? Are the properties of hydrophilous flower? Beta Veeresh, wettable means what? Wettable means that something that can get wet. That is what is the meaning of wettable. Okay, third last point. Beta third last point is pollen are naked. What does pollen are naked means? They are without exine. And if they are transferred from within the water, that means, let's say this is your water. This is your water. If the pollen grains get transferred from this plant to this plant, from under the water, then they will be thread-like. But if the pollen grain gets transferred from the surface of the water, then they will be spherical. That is what the third point means, right? That if they get transferred from within the water, they are thread-like. If they are transferred from the surface of the water, then they are spherical in nature. Okay, I hope, Naren, now the third last point is clear to you. Check it. So let's move forward then. Now, in majority of aquatic plants, okay, like water hyacinth. Okay, what is water hyacinth also known as? What is water hyacinth also known as? What is water hyacinth also known as? Okay, what is it like? What is it famous for? So water hyacinth is commonly known as terror of Bengal, right? Because it was an invasive species which we brought for its beautiful flowers, but now it reproduces very fast. How does water hyacinth reproduce, beta? How does water hyacinth reproduce? How does water hyacinth reproduce? So water hyacinth, I know vegetative reproduction, beta. Which mode of vegetative reproduction? That is what I'm asking. So water hyacinth reproduces by offset, right? If you remember, it reproduces by offset. Anyway, so what is the first point trying to say? The first point is trying to say that most of the aquatic plants, okay, that are above water, most of the aquatic plants like water hyacinth and water lily that are above water, they are pollinated by insects or wind, like most of the land plants. That, so what is the first statement trying to say? Let's read the statement. Majority of aquatic plants such as water hyacinth and water lily, flowers emerge above the level of water and are pollinated by insects or wind, as in most of the land plants. So just because a plant is found over the surface of water doesn't mean that it will be hydrophilous in nature. If the flower is above the surface of the water, then most probably it will depend on insects or wind like most of the other plants. So just because you see a flower, okay, just because, for example, water lily, it is found in water. But since the flower is above the surface of the water, since the flower is above the surface of the water, it does not depend on water for pollination. Okay, it can either depend on insects or it can either depend on wind. So do not get confused. Okay, they might ask you, what kind of pollination is seen in water lily. So ye mat sochna water lily is found in water, so it must be hydrophilous in nature. That is not the case. Okay, if the flower is above the surface of the water, then most probably it will depend on either insects or wind for pollination of okay, for pollination, for the purpose of pollination. Pritish, just stay back after the class, I'll explain here. Okay? Okay. So, Pooja, these are not hydrophilous flowers. So, water lily is not a hydrophilous flower. Water lily is not a hydrophilous flower. Hydrophilous flowers are those flowers which depend on water for pollination. Hydrophilous flowers are not those flowers which are found in water. Please remember this. Hydrophilous flowers are those flowers which depend on water for pollination. A flower that is found in water or on the surface of water is not called hydrophilous unless and until it depends on water for pollination. So make sure that you remember that. Just because you see water lily or water hyacinth on surface of water, it is not hydrophilous. They are not hydrophilous because they depend on insects for transfer of pollen grains. Okay? So what I want you guys to do is let me know whether lotus is hydrophilous or not. We all know that lotus is found over water. But is lotus hydrophilous or not? Check करके मुझे कल बताना, right? Is lotus hydrophilous or not? Okay? Let's see. So that is what the first point meant. I hope the first point is clear to everybody. Okay? Chalo. Next is in Vallisneria, the female flower reaches the surface of water by long stalk, and the male flowers or pollen grains are released on the surface of water. Okay, so what happens is, okay, so if we go back to the first figure that I had, so this is Vallisneria. As you can see, so here what happens is that the pollen grains are transferred on the surface of the water. And as you can see, the pistil is very long. It is reaching the surface of the water. And here, as you can see, the pollen grains are being released. Since they depend on the surface of the water, they are spherical in nature. Since they depend on surface of the water for pollination, they are spherical in nature. So as you can see, the male flowers are underwater and they are releasing pollen grains which are reaching the surface. And then the pistil, which opens at the top of the water surface, grabs those pollen grains, and then the fertilization takes place. Okay, so this is what happens in Vallisneria. Okay, and Vallisneria is hydrophilous. Yes, Chandrasekhar, Vallisneria is hydrophilous. Dekho Chandrasekhar, it is still depending on water for its pollination, right? How are the pollen grains being transferred? Pollen grains are being transferred by water. So Vallisneria is hydrophilous. Example में लिखा है ना, Vallisneria, Hydrilla and Zostera. They are hydrophilous because it is depending on water for pollen transfer. Water hyacinth इसलिए नहीं है because water hyacinth does not require water for transfer of pollen grains. So remember, hydrophilous means transfer of pollen grains by water. It has nothing to do with the fact that whether the plant is on the surface of the water or not. If the pollen grains are being transferred by water, then they are hydrophilous. So what happens in Vallisneria? What happens in Vallisneria? The pollen grains are released by the male flowers which are underwater. They reach the surface of the water. Then the female flower picks them up. Okay? So in Vallisneria, surface of the water is used. So the pollen grains are spherical in nature. Yeah, that one. So pollen grains are spherical in nature. Okay? Okay. In Zostera, female flowers remain submerged in water and the pollen grains are released inside the water. So in Zostera, what happens is it takes place, pollen grains are transferred within the water. Why? Because the female flowers are also submerged in water. Remember the key difference between hydrophily in Vallisneria and Zostera. In Vallisneria, the female reproductive part is above the water. So male has to release its pollen grains so that they reach the surface of the water and fuse with the female part which is present on the surface of the water. But in Zostera, the female is also underwater, male is also underwater, so everything takes place within the water. So the pollen grains are ribbon-like in Zostera. Sabko clear hua? What am I trying to say? Is this clear to everybody? Is this clear to everybody what I was trying to say in this particular slide? Ye sabko samjha kya? So that I'll move forward. Okay, Chetan, you want me to repeat this option statement number 3? Dekho, Zostera kya hota hai? So we just saw in Vallisneria what happens is the female flower is above the surface of the water. And we know that pollen grain ko jana kahan hai? Female ke paas. Since female is on the surface of the water, pollen also has to go to the surface of the water. And then it meets the female part. But in Zostera, the female is also underwater. Male to underwater hai. So instead of going to the surface of the water, the pollen gets transferred within the water themselves. That is what the third point means. Okay? Sabko samjha? So I'll move forward then. So please remember this. Please remember this. This is very important. Okay? Because sometimes questions have been asked from this also. Right? What is the difference between hydrophily in Vallisneria and Zostera? Okay, so please remember this at all cost. Clear? Okay, now let's move forward. Next is your zoophily. So we are done with anemophily, we are done with hydrophily. Next is what? Next is zoophily. So what is zoophily? Zoo means animal in Greek, right? And phily means love. So it is pollination through the agency of animals. It is pollination through the agency of animals. So whenever animals are required for pollination, okay, then you call it zoophily. So what are the most common types of pollinator? Most common type of animal pollinators are insects. We all know that. Other are birds, bats, snails, human beings. Human beings can also act as agent of pollination. Okay, when we forcefully transfer pollen grains from one anther to the stigma of another flower, so human beings can also act as an agent of pollination. Obviously, we are not a natural agent of pollination, right? So what is zoophily? Zoophily is whenever pollination takes place to animals. Okay, okay, 1 second guys. Yeah, so that is what zoophily is. Now let's look at properties. Before you look at properties, just one more thing, that the most common type of zoophily, in which pollen grains of ripe anther of one flower are transferred to mature stigma of another flower through the agency of insects like moths, butterfly, wasps, bees, beetles, etc. So just repeating the same point, that insects are the most common form of zoophily, and when insects transfer pollen grains, then we call it entomophily. Okay, so if somebody asks you what is entomophily, so tell them entomophily is when pollen grains are transferred specifically by insects. In zoophily, we talk about insects also, we talk about birds also. we talk about snails also, we talk about bats also, we also talk about humans. But entomophily is specifically by insects and nobody else. That is the clear distinction. That is the clear distinction between zoophily and entomophily. Okay, entomophily is a subcategory of zoophily. Okay, so in zoophily, all the types of animals that can carry out pollination are mentioned. In entomophily, only insects are mentioned. Okay, okay. So how human beings, beta? So human beings also are involved in pollination, right? So instead of depending for a plant to pollinate naturally, I can take pollen grains from the anther of a flower and I can dust them onto the stigma of another flower. So as a result, human beings acted as your agent of pollination, right? Just give me a minute, guys. Now, so that is your entomophily. So I hope the difference between entomophily and zoophily is clear to everybody. Zoophily is all organisms, all animals together. Entomophily is specifically insects. Okay? Chalo. Let's move forward then. What are the characteristics? What are the characteristics of entomophilous flower? Flowers are showy or brightly colored, obviously, because you need to attract the insects. So flowers are showy or brightly colored. That is, you know, they tend to show off their features. Look, I have big petals, I have big sepals. Please come to me. And the small flowers become conspicuous by grouping. So there might be some flowers that are small, right? So what do these small flowers do? These small flowers come together so that they appear as one big flower, so that they appear as one big flower to the insect. So if there are small flowers which cannot grow big in size, what do these small flowers do? These small flowers come together, a lot of them come together so that they look as one big flower to attract the insect. That is what the second point means. Now, most insect pollinated flowers have a landing platform. Obviously, just like a helicopter needs a helipad to land, insects also need a platform to land. So that is what the third point means, that most insect pollinated flowers have a landing platform. They have a landing platform. Now, the flowers produce an odor which may be pleasant. For example, jasmine ki khushboo, right? Most of us love the odor of jasmine flower, or they could stink also, right? But we have preferences. We like this particular smell. We do not like this particular smell. But insects, they just care about odor. For them, there is no such thing as bad odor. Okay, so it can be pleasant also, as in jasmine, or it could be bad also, as in Aristolochia, arum, or Rafflesia. Okay, do any of you know what is Rafflesia? Do you guys know what is Rafflesia? Do you guys know what is Rafflesia? Why is it so famous? Any of you know what is Rafflesia? So Rafflesia is the largest flower. Rafflesia is the largest flower in the world, and it produces the smell of stinking meat, as if a meat is getting spoiled. So that is what the smell of Rafflesia is like. So I think it is found in South America, if I'm not right. I think it's found in South America, right? So the odor may be pleasant, as in jasmine or sometimes rose also, or they could stink also, as in Astrolochia, arum, or Rafflesia. Now, nectar is secreted for feeding the visiting insect. Obviously, you need to give the insect some reward, right? Only then, ठीक है, color दिखा दिया, ठीक है, you know, flower looks very good, odor भी अच्छा है, but unless the insect is getting something out of it, insect will probably not come. So what do? You produce nectar so that the insect can feed on it, and then it will be attracted to it. Can human being die by its odor? I don't think so, yeah, but I don't know. Maybe if you smell it for 100 days, I don't know whether you will die or not, but you will probably lose your sanity. Okay? So those are some of the properties of entomophilous flowers. Everything that they have, that is to attract the insects. Let's become big. Let's become colorful. Let's have an odor. Let's produce nectar. Let's give them a landing platform. जितनी सेवा कर सकते हैं insects की करते हैं. Only then they will help us in propagating further. ठीक है? Okay. Now, few more properties. Pollen grains are spiny, heavy, and surrounded by yellow oily stick substance called pollen kit. I mentioned pollen kit also. So pollen grains are spiny, heavy, and sorry. So surrounded by a sticky substance known as pollen kit, surrounded by a sticky substance known as pollen kit, so that they get stuck to the insect when they come for feeding. Now, stigmas are often inserted and sticky. So obviously stigmas are also sticky, so that when the insect lands on it, the pollen grain can be transferred from the leg or the body of the insect to the stigma. Some flowers provide safe place for insects for laying eggs. This is very important. Remember the example. Okay. So some flowers, apart from giving them nectar, also provide the insects a safe place for laying eggs. Another benefit for insect to come visit the flower. So examples are yucca, okay, Amorphophallus, and Amorphophallus is the tallest flower. Rafflesia is the biggest flower. Its diameter is huge. Amorphophallus is the tallest flower. Yaad rakhna, this is mentioned in a textbook also, if I remember correctly, that Amorphophallus is the tallest flower. Okay, so what reward can the flower provide? The flowers can provide them with nectar. Apart from that, the flowers can also provide a safe place for the insects to lay eggs. So the insects have even more of an incentive to visit the particular plant. Okay, now, yaad rakhna, whatever I'm teaching in this slide, that a species of moth, which is known as yucca moth, and the plant yucca, where both species, moth and plant, cannot complete their life cycle without each other. This is very important, that yucca moth. So this is a figure of yucca moth in yucca plant. Okay. So yucca moth and yucca both depend on each other for completing their life cycle. If even one of them goes missing, if let's say suddenly in this world I vanish out all the yucca moths, so what will happen is that soon yucca plants will die out, because yucca plants depend on yucca moth. And the reverse also goes. If I suddenly vanish, remove all the yucca plants, then yucca moth will suddenly die out, because yucca moth depends on yucca plant for its future generation. So how is it dependent? The moth deposits its egg in the locule of the ovary. If you remember, ovary has locules, right? Monolocular, bilocular, depending on how many compartments they have. The compartments of the ovary are known as locules, right? So the moth depends its eggs in the locule of the ovary, and the flower in turn gets pollinated by the moth. So yucca moth completely depends on yucca plant for depositing its egg. It deposits its egg nowhere apart from locules of the ovary of the yucca plant. So if all the yucca plants are vanished, the moth will not have any place to lay its egg. If it cannot lay its egg, obviously it will vanish out. Similarly, the yucca plant depends only on yucca moth for its pollination. So if yucca moth completely vanishes out, then yucca plant will also die out. Okay? So the larvae of the moth come out of the eggs as the seeds start developing. Okay? So the larva of the moth also develops in the yucca plant, and once it is ready, then it flies off. So please remember this, that yucca moth and yucca plant are codependent on each other, for completing their respective life cycles. Okay? Yucca moth lays their egg in yucca plant, and yucca plant gets pollinated only by yucca moth. Okay? So is this clear to everybody? Very good, Kirti. Okay? Is this clear to everybody? Kishore, you want me to explain again? Chalo. So what does this mean, beta? Simple सा भाषा है. Yucca moth बिना yucca plant के नहीं रह सकता. Yucca plant yucca moth के बिना नहीं रह सकता. Right? It's like two lovers which cannot be separated from each other, which cannot, live without each other. Romeo and Juliet. Okay. So why are they dependent on each other? Because yucca moth only lays its egg in the locules of ovary of yucca plant, and yucca plant only depends on yucca moth for pollination. So अगर yucca moth नहीं होगा तो pollination नहीं होगा, and yucca plant will die. As Kirtan said, Kabir Singh, right? I don't know whether you guys know that. Okay, but obviously you guys would know. So like Kabir Singh and Preeti, they cannot live without each other. Same thing, yucca moth and yucca plant, they cannot live without each other. Okay? Okay. हाँ Pritesh, जान है तो जहान है. Okay, thank you very much. So that is what entomophily is. That is what entomophily is. Now, few more examples of zoophily. So if they are transferred by bats, then it's called chiropterophily. Then it is called what? Then it is called chiropterophily. So if bats are involved in pollination, we call it chiropterophily. If snails are involved in pollination, we call it malacophily, right? So so in the photo that is in the slide, you see a snail that is involved in pollination. And if a bird is involved in pollination, then you call it ornithophily. So yaad rakh lena, they might give you, so chiropterophily. Which one of the following animals is involved in chiropterophily? Remember, bats. Which one of the following animal is involved in malacophily? Remember, snails. Which one of the following is involved in ornithophily? Remember, birds. Which one of the following is involved in entomophily? Remember, insects. So these are the names for pollination if they are carried out by bats, snails, or birds. Okay, okay, done. So that was your cross pollination. Yahan tak sabko samjha kya beta? Give me a yes or no. Is this clear to everybody so that I can move forward? Yahan tak sabko samjha? So I'll move forward then. Simple tha? Okay, take it. Let's move forward then. Thank you very much. Now, outbreeding devices, that is the next topic. Now, what are outbreeding devices? They go. So, flowers that are bisexual. Flowers that are bisexual. So, Pushpa is asking, how do carnivorous plants like pitcher get pollinated? But carnivorous plants also get pollinated in the same manner as a normal flower does. Okay, their mode of nutrition is different. Okay, they do not have a special mode of reproduction. So, we all know that cross pollination is very important. We all know that cross pollination is very important because it introduces new variety. But in flowers that are bisexual in nature, the problem is that self-pollination can also happen. And plants prefer not to undergo self-pollination because plants also know that self-pollination is not good, right? So plants come up with certain techniques. To prevent self-pollination. And these techniques are known as outbreeding devices. Okay, outbreeding, bahar breed karna. So these devices are known as outbreeding devices. Okay? So I hope that a brief introduction of outbreeding devices is clear to everybody. So these are techniques or devices developed by bisexual flowers to ensure that cross-pollination happens despite the fact that they contain both male and female gametes. Okay? Okay. So majority of the flowering plants produce hermaphrodite flowers, and pollen grains are likely to come in contact with stigma of the same flower. Obviously, if they are bisexual, if they are hermaphrodite, then the chances of pollen grain transferring to the stigma of the same flower are very high. And we know that continued self-pollination results in inbreeding depression. So we will learn what is inbreeding depression in your chapters related to animal husbandry and farming practices, right? So inbreeding depression in layman terms, if I have to explain, if you keep on doing self-pollination, then what happens is the bad characteristics get amplified. That is known as inbreeding depression. Okay, so continued self-pollination results in inbreeding depression. Plants know that self-pollination continuous is not good. So they come up with certain techniques. So flowering plants have developed many devices to discourage self-pollination and to encourage cross-pollination, which are known as outbreeding devices. So what are outbreeding devices? Devices developed by bisexual flowers to ensure that cross-pollination takes place. That is, those are known as outbreeding devices. Sabko samjha what are outbreeding devices, beta? We will see what are the few outbreeding devices. But is the basic of outbreeding devices clear to everybody? What are outbreeding devices? Techniques or devices developed by plants, bisexual flowers to ensure that cross-pollination happens. Okay? Let's see some of the outbreeding devices. The first one that we have is declining, which is unisexuality. Simple. Some flowers grows unisexual so that self-pollination is not possible. So declining is the first and the most simplest one. That is, the flowers are unisexual in nature. If they're unisexual, obviously self-pollination cannot take place. So that is the first outbreeding devices that plant use. That is कि let's just grow unisexual flowers. पंगा ही खत्म करते हैं. Instead of growing bisexual flowers and having to deal with all the mess, let's just grow unisexual flowers. So that property is known as decline. After that, what you have is dichogamy. So what is dichogamy? ध्यान से सुनना. So dichogamy is anthers and stigma mature at different times in a bisexual flowers. So what happens is anther will mature at a different time, stigma will mature at a different time. इससे क्या होगा? Let's say when the anther is maturing, if the stigma is not mature, so even if pollen grain move from anther to stigma of the same flower, no fertilization will take place because the stigma is not yet mature. So cross pollination will be increased. और उल्टा भी हो सकता है. Stigma will become mature first before your anther. So anther तो ये pollen grain release कर ही नहीं सकता. So since stigma is matured, pollen grains from other flower will come and land on it and fertilization will take place. So this is known as dichogamy. There is no synchronization. There is no synchronization in the release of anther and stigma. Okay, and I think I gave you a term for synchronization also. When they are synchronized in release of or maturity of anther and stigma. What was that term? When anther and stigma synchronize at the same time. When anther and stigma synchronize at the same time. I gave you a term for that also. When anther and stigma synchronize at the same time. So the term for that was homogamy, right? If you remember, I mentioned homogamy. Homogamy is when anther and stigma mature at the same time, right? So when anther and stigma do not mature at the same time, you call it dichogamy. So dichogamy is the opposite of homogamy. याद रखना बेटा. Okay, जब भूलते मत जाओ पिछला क्लास का. So homogamy is when anther and stigma mature at the same time. Dichogamy is when they mature at the different time. Now dichogamy is of two types. Protandry. Protandry means what? Anther mature early. Pro means before. Andry means male part. So anther matures first. Anther matures first. Example, sunflower, salvia. Example, sunflower, salvia. Okay? Then you have protogyny. Then you have what? Then you have protogyny. So what is protogyny? When stigmas mature early. When stigmas mature early. Before the anther of the same flower. Okay, what are the examples? Examples are Mirabilis jalapa, which is 4 o'clock plant, and Gloriosa. Okay, so you will be studying about Mirabilis jalapa in chapter number 5 also. It is a very interesting flower which shows very interesting characteristics. So what are the examples of protogyny? That is the female part matures early. Examples are Mirabilis jalapa or 4 o'clock plant or Gloriosa. Then you have prepotency. Prepotency. So what is prepotency? Pollen grains of another flower germinate more rapidly over the stigma than the pollen grain of the same flower. So abhi kya hua? There is a stigma. What does this mean? There is a stigma. Okay? This is the pollen grain from the same flower and this is the pollen grain from a different flower. I'll use something else. So this is a pollen grain from a different flower. So what will happen is the pollen grain of the different flower will grow faster than the pollen grain of the same flower. That is what we mean by prepotency. That is, pollen grain of another flower will germinate more rapidly over the pollen grain of different flower, over the pollen grain of the same flower. Okay, this is because of the interplay of certain genes and the proteins that they express. So what is prepotency? Prepotency is when pollen grains of different flower germinate more rapidly than pollen grain of the same flower. So that is what prepotency is. What are the examples? Examples are apple and grape. So in this slide we studied about 3 types of outbreeding devices. Here you have declining, which is unisexual flowers. Unisexual flowers they produce karo. Let's end this case right here, right now. Then you have dichogamy, which is opposite of homogamy. If male mature first, protandry. If female part matures first, protogyny. If pollen grain of a different flower produces pollen tube more rapidly, germinates more rapidly than pollen grain of a same flower, then you call it prepotency. Then you call it what? Prepotency. Okay? Okay, let's move forward then. Two more outbreeding devices. So then you have self-sterility, that is self-incompatibility. So in this case, what happens is pollen grains of a flower do not germinate on the same flower. Okay, that is pollen grain of a flower do not germinate over the stigma of the same flower. So agar same flower mein hi pollen grain aa raha hai, it will not germinate at all. It is not germinate. It will not germinate at all. So it is because of S1 and S2 gene. Okay, something that is beyond the scope of your study. So it is because of S1 and S2 gene with which they can detect whether the pollen grain belongs to the same plant, whether the pollen grain belongs to the same plant or same flower or not. If it belongs to the same flower, then it rejects it. Then it will not germinate itself. So that is known as self-sterility or self-incompatibility. What are the examples? Example are tobacco and potato. So in tobacco and potato, self-sterility is seen. Atharv, just stay back after the class. मैं दोबारा explain कर दूंगा बेटा. ठीक है? So what is self-sterility? When pollen grain of a flower does not germinate on the stigma of the same flower, it rejects it. Okay, it identifies certain genes in it, and then it's like you belong to the same family. We are not reproducing with you. Last is heterostyly. Last is heterostyly. What is heterostyly? There are 2 or 3 types of flower with different heights of styles. So there are different heights of style. So as you can see here, if you look at this figure closely, the anther are shorter than stigma. The anther are shorter than stigma. So the chances of pollen grain coming in contact, the chances of pollen grain coming in contact with the stigma are less because they are shorter in height. In this one, if you look at it, the pollen grains are taller and the stigma is shorter. So again, the chances of pollen grain coming in one second. It is different. Beta, prepotency is different than protogyny. Prepotency is different than protogyny. So as to what is heterostyly? So heterostyly is when there are different heights of style. When there are different heights of style, it can be either shorter. It can be either shorter than the stamen, or it can be longer than the stamen. So if the heights are different, they are not at the same level, then the chances of anther coming in contact with the stigma are less. So that is known as heterostyly. That is known as heterostyly. So we talked about 5 outbreeding devices: declining, then you have dichogamy, then you have prepotency. After that, we talked about self-sterility and heterostyly. Okay? So the next topic that we have is advantages of cross-pollination, which I'll start tomorrow. Okay? So tomorrow I'll start with advantages of cross-pollination. I'll stop today's class here. Okay? Just give me a minute, guys, before you all run off. Just give me a quick feedback. And those of you have any doubts, if you want me to repeat any particular thing, you can stay back after the class. Otherwise, just give me a quick feedback, then you guys are free to go. Okay? Okay, Jyoti inconspicuous means that inconspicuous means something that is not easily visible. Something that is not easily visible. Okay? Dhanush, yes. So notes of yesterday's till yesterday's class have been uploaded. Today's notes will be uploaded by midnight tonight, most probably. Okay? Okay. So give me a quick feedback, then you guys are free to go. If you have any doubts, you can stay back. Okay, ठीक है. Just stay back. Let me just end the class. Then I'll clear up all your doubts. Okay, chalo. Thank you very much for your patience here. As always, it was a privilege teaching you guys. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Please take care, everybody. Same time, same place. We'll meet here. Okay, take care. Bye bye.